It's something we totally take for granted, that the food we grab from the shelf and the medicine in our cabinet are safe. But that safety net we rely on, well, it was born from a truly shocking chapter in American history. We're talking about dangerous chemicals, deadly syrups for babies, and a book that accidentally kicked off a revolution. So, let's get into how it all went down.
And this quote from author Upton Sinclair, it just sums up the whole wild story perfectly. He was trying to write this groundbreaking novel about the terrible conditions of immigrant workers, hoping to really pull on the public's heartstrings. But what ended up horrifying the entire country wasn't their suffering. It was what was actually ending up on their dinner plates.
So, before 1906, you have to understand the American market for food and medicine was basically the Wild West. There were no real federal rules, zero safety standards, and absolutely no consequences for selling dangerous stuff. It was so bad that historians have actually called it the Great American Stomachache, and trust me, it's for a very, very good reason.
And look, this wasn't some rare back alley stuff. This was standard practice. To make more money and to hide that their goods were spoiled, producers put some truly unbelievable things in everyday products. I mean, formaldehyde, the chemical used for embalming bodies, was a common additive to keep milk from going bad. The cinnamon in your pantry was often just colored brick dust. You literally had no idea what you were actually eating.
And the problem wasn't just your food. The medicine cabinet was just as bad, if not worse. A journalist named Samuel Hopkins Adams famously called the patent medicine industry the Great American Fraud. It was this massive empire built on selling totally useless, dangerous, and addictive potions that made these miraculous claims. And this is where it gets absolutely terrifying. These soothing syrups that parents would give to their crying babies, they were loaded with narcotics like morphine, opium, and even heroin. And because companies didn't have to list ingredients on the label, parents had no clue they were addicting their own children. These medicines promised to cure everything under the sun, but all they really did was cause more suffering.
And then the jungle hit. This quote, it's just so visceral. It's talking about workers literally falling into rendering vats in the meatpacking plants in Chicago. Sinclair's novel painted this revolting, unforgettable picture of diseased animals being processed right alongside healthy ones, of meat dropping onto floors covered in filth and rat droppings, just a complete and total disregard for basic sanitation or human life.
So you've got this powder cake, right? Just waiting for a spark. And that spark came from two totally different places at once. You had a determined government chemist who had a taste for some pretty radical experiments, and then you had that accidental muckraking novelist we just talked about.
It was like this fight for safety was being fought on two different fronts. On one side, you had Dr. Harvey Wiley, and he was using science to get cold, hard data. And on the other, you had Upton Sinclair, using his novel to stir up this massive, emotional, public outrage. One gave lawmakers the proof they needed, and the other gave them the pressure they couldn't ignore.
Dr. Wiley's experiment, it was incredible. Can you even imagine this today? He got a group of healthy young men to volunteer to eat all their meals laced with common chemical preservatives. The newspapers had a field day with it, and they nicknamed them the Poison Squad. Their story completely captivated the country, and for the very first time, there was scientific proof that these chemicals were actually poisoning people.
At the exact same time, Upton Sinclair publishes The Jungle. Now remember, his goal was to expose the brutal, soul-crushing exploitation of immigrant workers. He was hoping to light a fire for a socialist revolution. But the public? They kind of just ignored the plight of the workers and instead became absolutely obsessed with the disgusting details about their contaminated meat. And that, right there, was the tipping point. You combine Wiley's damning scientific proof with the gut-wrenching disgust people felt after reading The Jungle, and suddenly you have a political firestorm that not even President Theodore Roosevelt could ignore. The pressure on Congress became absolutely immense.
And just look at how fast everything happened in 1906. It's wild. The Jungle becomes this massive bestseller. President Roosevelt sends his own investigators who come back and say, yep, it's pretty much all true. And just a month after that, Congress is basically forced to act, passing these huge, monumental laws with astonishing speed.
So on a single day, June 30th, 1906, bam, two historic laws get passed. The Meat Inspection Act was the direct answer to The Jungle. It demanded federal oversight and sanitary standards in slaughterhouses. And the Pure Food and Drug Act? That was the culmination of all of Dr. Wiley's work, going after shady labeling and dangerous additives in all food and drugs.
And these laws introduced two brand new, powerful concepts into federal law: adulteration and misbranding. So for the first time ever, it was officially illegal to secretly water down a product or contaminate it. And maybe most importantly, it was illegal to lie on a label. This was the birth of truth in labeling.
But okay, the story doesn't just stop there in 1906. Not by a long shot. Those laws were a revolutionary first step, for sure, but they were really just the beginning. The agency created to enforce them, which we now know as the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, well, it had a long road ahead.
This number, over 100, it represents a tragedy that showed a massive gaping hole in that original law. See, in 1937, a drug company sold a medicine called elixir sulfanilamide, and they used a poisonous industrial solvent to make it. It killed over 100 people, a lot of them kids. The 1906 law had made it illegal to lie on a label, but it never said companies had to prove their stuff was safe before they put it on the market. That tragedy, horrible as it was, led directly to the next big step, the 1938 Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And this was huge because for the first time, it required companies to actually test new drugs for safety before selling them. The FDA's power just kept expanding over the decades, usually because of new dangers that popped up, like pesticides and chemical additives. Which brings us all the way to today. The legacy of that poison squad and that shocking book is an agency that regulates a massive chunk of our daily lives. I mean, think about it. The food we eat, the medicine we take, the vaccines we get, even the medical devices in our hospitals. The principles that were fought for over 100 years ago are still protecting us.
So the next time you look at a food label or you take a medication without a second thought, it's pretty wild to remember the unlikely pair, a stubborn scientist and an accidental novelist who made that trust possible. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would be on your plate today if they hadn't fought that fight?